Think you know everything about America's favorite hillbillies? Think again. From a deadly makeup mishap that nearly killed Buddy Ebsen to a bitter political feud that destroyed friendships forever, the Beverly Hillbillies hid some truly shocking secrets behind its wholesome facade. Prepare to discover the scandalous lawsuits, tragic connections to Charles Manson, and the astronomical real estate drama that will change how you see the Clampett family forever. Fact 1. Buddy Ebsen's near-death Wizard of Oz experience. Long before Buddy Ebsen became the lovable patriarch Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies, he was supposed to be dancing down the yellow brick road in one of Hollywood's most famous movies. In 1938, Ebsen was originally cast as the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz, and he was thrilled to be part of what everyone knew would be a major MGM production. The studio had big plans for the film, and Ebsen had already started filming several scenes when everything went horribly wrong. The problem wasn't Ebsen's acting or dancing abilities, which were considerable since he'd been performing on Broadway for years alongside stars like Judy Garland and Shirley Temple. Instead, it was the silver makeup that nearly killed him. The Tin Man costume required a special metallic makeup made from aluminum powder that was painted all over Ebsen's face and exposed skin to create that shiny, robotic look that audiences expected from the character. After just a few days of filming, Ebsen began experiencing severe breathing problems and chest pains that got worse each day. He was rushed to the hospital in what doctors described as serious respiratory distress, and it took them a while to figure out what was causing his mysterious illness. When they finally realized that the aluminum powder in his makeup was coating his lungs and essentially poisoning him from the inside, Ebsen had to spend 2 full weeks in the hospital recovering. The damage was already done, though, and doctors told him that this toxic exposure would likely affect his breathing for the rest of his life. MGM had no choice but to replace him with Jack Haley, who took over the Tin Man role using a safer paste-based makeup instead of the dangerous aluminum powder. Ebsen lived with respiratory problems for decades afterward, always blaming his near-death experience on The Wizard of Oz, set for his ongoing health troubles. Fact 2. The Sharon Tate connection. Years before Sharon Tate became tragically known as one of the victims in the Charles Manson murders, she was actually a regular face on American television screens as part of the Beverly Hillbillies cast. Between 1963 and 1965, Tate appeared in 15 episodes of the hit sitcom, playing a character named Janet Trago, who worked as a secretary at the Commerce Bank of Beverly Hills, alongside Nancy Culp's character Miss Jane Hathaway. Tate's character Janet was written as one of the young women who caught the eye of Baer Jr.'s character Jethro Bodine, though like most of Jethro's romantic interests on the show, she didn't return his affections. Her appearances on the Beverly Hillbillies were among her first credited roles as an actress, and they helped establish her career in Hollywood during the early 1960s, when she was still a relatively unknown performer trying to make her mark in the entertainment industry. At the time she was filming these episodes, Tate was a vibrant young actress in her early 20s who brought energy and charm to every scene she appeared in. The role gave her valuable experience working with established television stars and helped her develop the screen presence that would later make her a sought-after actress for both television and film projects throughout the decade. The Beverly Hillbillies appearances were part of Tate's steady climb up the Hollywood ladder, where she was building a reputation as a talented and beautiful young actress with a bright future ahead of her. She worked consistently throughout the mid-1960s, appearing in various television shows and movies while developing her craft and gaining recognition in the industry. Tragically, Tate's promising career and life were cut short in August of 1969, when she became one of the victims in the horrific murders committed by members of Charles Manson's cult at her home in Benedict Canyon, where she was living with her husband, director Roman Polanski. Fact 3. Baer Jr.'s $1 million legal battle. Decades after the Beverly Hillbillies ended, Baer Jr. found himself in a bitter legal fight with CBS over his most famous character, and it all started with barbecue. In 2014, Baer filed a lawsuit against the network claiming they had secretly made a deal with a restaurant chain called Jethro's BBQ that violated his exclusive rights to use the Jethro Bodine character for commercial purposes. The whole mess began back in 1991 when Baer had negotiated what he called a broad licensing agreement with CBS that gave him the rights to develop restaurants, hotels, casinos, and other businesses using Beverly Hillbillies themes and characters. Baer had big plans for his character and had already spent over $1 million of his own money trying to develop hillbilly-themed businesses. including paying royalties back to CBS for merchandise like themed slot machines and even his own brand of barbecue sauce. What made Baer furious was that while he was working on his own projects and paying the network for the privilege, CBS had apparently cut a separate deal with Jethro's BBQ, a popular restaurant chain based in Des Moines, Iowa, that had grown from one location to 6 restaurants throughout the area. The restaurant owner, Bruce Gerleman, said that CBS had contacted him in 2008 after he opened his first location, and they worked out an agreement where he modified his original logo and changed some details, like switching his character's rope belt to suspenders. Baer claimed this secret arrangement was diluting his exclusive rights to the Jethro brand and interfering with his own plans to open a chain of Jethro-themed restaurants and casinos, particularly his ambitious project to bring Beverly Hillbillies-themed businesses to the Las Vegas Strip. The lawsuit made 4 separate claims against CBS, including breach of contract, and highlighted just how valuable these old television characters could still be decades after the show went off the air. Fact 4. The bitter political feud that destroyed friendships. What seemed like harmless political disagreements on the Beverly Hillbillies said eventually turned into one of Hollywood's most bitter and personal feuds, and it all came to a head when Nancy Culp decided to run for Congress in 1984. Culp, who played the loyal secretary Miss Jane Hathaway, and Buddy Ebsen, who portrayed family patriarch Jed Clampett, had been arguing about politics for years while filming the show, with the conservative Republican Ebsen constantly clashing with the liberal Democrat Culp during what should have been friendly conversations between takes. Cast members who worked with both actors said these political discussions would regularly start out calm and civilized, but they almost always escalated into full-blown shouting matches with name-calling and personal attacks that made everyone else on set extremely uncomfortable. Both Ebsen and Culp were former naval officers who felt strongly about their political beliefs, and neither one was willing to back down or agree to disagree when it came to the issues they cared about most. The real betrayal came years after the show ended, when Culp returned to her home state of Pennsylvania and decided to run as the Democratic candidate for the United States House of Representatives against 6-term Republican incumbent Bud Shuster. Culp knew she was a serious underdog in a heavily Republican district, but she never expected her former co-star to get involved in her campaign from 3,000 miles away in California. Ebsen contacted Shuster's campaign office and volunteered to record radio advertisements attacking Culp, calling her too liberal for Pennsylvania voters and suggesting that her Hollywood background made her unfit for public office. Culp was devastated by what she saw as a personal betrayal, saying that Ebsen had no business getting involved in her campaign and that she wished he had stayed out of it entirely. She lost the election badly, receiving only 33.6% of the vote, and never spoke to Ebsen again, except during interviews about their time on the show. Fact 5. The secret mansion location disaster. The beautiful mansion that served as the Clampett family home on the Beverly Hillbillies wasn't actually located in Beverly Hills at all, and the real story behind its use created a tourist nightmare that lasted for decades. The stunning French chateau-style estate was actually located at 750 Bel Air Road in the upscale Bel Air neighborhood, and it belonged to a wealthy real estate investor and art collector named Arnold Kirkeby, whose widow agreed to let the show use the property for exterior shots with one very important condition. The Kirkeby family insisted that the actual address of the mansion had to remain completely secret from the public, and the production company agreed to this requirement because they needed the location and were willing to pay $500 per day for filming rights. The widow was understandably concerned about privacy and didn't want hordes of television fans showing up at her front door, so keeping the location confidential seemed like a reasonable request that would protect both the family and the production. Unfortunately, keeping a film crew's presence secret turned out to be nearly impossible, especially when that crew was working at one of the most recognizable houses on television. Week after week, viewers across America saw the mansion's distinctive exterior in the opening credits and establishing shots, and it didn't take long for dedicated fans to start figuring out exactly where the Clampett family supposedly lived. Once the address leaked out, which happened surprisingly quickly in the days before the internet made such information spread instantly, the mansion became a major tourist attraction that drew curious visitors from around the world. Cars would drive slowly past the property at all hours. Fans would take pictures through the gates, and some bold visitors even tried to get onto the grounds to see where their favorite television family lived. The constant stream of tourists became such a problem that the family eventually had to completely redesign the property's entrance and move it to a different location where the house could no longer be seen from the street, effectively ending decades of unauthorized Beverly Hillbillies tourism. Fact 6. Donna Douglas's $200 million Sister Act lawsuit. Long after her days as the sweet and innocent Ellie Mae Clampett ended, Donna Douglas found herself at the center of a massive legal battle that shocked Hollywood when she sued some of the biggest names in entertainment for what she claimed was outright theft of her creative work. In 1993, Douglas filed a $200 million lawsuit against Whoopi Goldberg, Bette Midler, Walt Disney Pictures, and several other major players in the entertainment industry, alleging that the hit movie Sister Act had been improperly stolen from a screenplay and book that she co-owned. Douglas claimed that Sister Act, which had become a huge box office success and launched a successful franchise, contained more than 100 specific similarities to her own work called A Nun in the Closet, which she insisted had been created years before the Disney movie went into production. According to her lawsuit, the similarities were so numerous and so specific that there was no way they could have been coincidental, and she demanded that the court recognize her as the original creator of the story concept that made Sister Act such a popular and profitable film. The lawsuit targeted not just the stars of the movie but also the major studio behind it, suggesting that Douglas believed there had been a deliberate and coordinated effort to steal her intellectual property and turn it into a blockbuster film without giving her any credit or compensation for her original ideas. She was seeking damages that would have made this one of the largest copyright infringement settlements in Hollywood history if she had been successful in proving her case. The legal action represented a dramatic departure from Douglas's usual public image as the wholesome, nature-loving character she had played on the Beverly Hillbillies, and it showed that she was willing to fight aggressively to protect what she believed were her creative rights, even when that meant going up against some of the most powerful people and companies in the entertainment business. Fact 7. The real slaps weren't acting. One of the most memorable running gags on the Beverly Hillbillies involved the feisty Granny Clampett smacking some sense into her dim-witted great-nephew Jethro whenever he said something particularly foolish, but what audiences didn't know was that actress Irene Ryan was actually delivering real slaps instead of the fake stage slaps that actors typically use during filming. In interviews years later, Ryan openly admitted that those weren't gentle theatrical slaps designed to look dramatic for the camera while protecting the other actor from any real harm. Ryan, who was known to be a sweet and professional lady in her personal life, apparently had no problem with physically disciplining Baer Jr. when the script called for Granny to put Jethro in his place with a good smack across the face or a sharp rap on the head. The show frequently featured scenes where Granny would get fed up with Jethro's latest harebrained scheme or his general lack of common sense, and she would express her frustration by delivering what appeared to be a quick but firm slap to snap him back to reality. Most television and movie actors learn early in their careers how to make physical contact look real and painful on screen, while actually using carefully choreographed movements that don't cause any actual harm to their fellow performers. Stage slaps typically involve hitting the air near someone's face, while the other actor snaps their head back and makes the appropriate sound effects, or gently tapping someone's cheek while both actors sell the moment through their reactions and body language. Ryan clearly decided that this approach wasn't necessary or effective for her character's relationship with Jethro, and she chose instead to give Baer the real physical correction that Granny would have delivered to a misbehaving family member. Baer apparently took these genuine slaps in good humor and never complained about Ryan's more direct approach to their comedic scenes together. Fact 8. CBS's costly copyright blunder. In what has to be one of the most expensive clerical errors in television history, CBS made a massive mistake that cost them millions of dollars in potential revenue when they simply forgot to renew the copyrights on the first 55 episodes of the Beverly Hillbillies before those copyrights expired. This wasn't a deliberate business decision or a strategic move to put the episodes into the public domain, but rather a complete oversight by someone in the network's legal department who apparently didn't realize that copyright protection doesn't last forever without proper renewal. When copyrights expire without being renewed, the protected material automatically enters what's called the public domain, which means that anyone can legally use, distribute, or broadcast that content without paying any licensing fees or royalties to the original copyright holders. For a popular television show like the Beverly Hillbillies, This represented an enormous financial loss, because these episodes could have continued generating revenue through syndication deals, streaming rights, and international licensing agreements for decades to come. The mistake was particularly costly because the Beverly Hillbillies remained incredibly popular in reruns long after the original series ended, and networks around the world were eager to pay substantial fees for the right to broadcast these classic episodes to new generations of viewers. Once the first 55 episodes fell into the public domain, any television network, streaming service, or distribution company could air them completely free of charge, which meant CBS lost all control over how and where these episodes were shown. This type of copyright blunder wasn't unusual during the 1960s and 70s, when many studios and networks were less careful about protecting their intellectual property rights than they are today. Other famous productions that fell into the public domain due to similar oversights include classic movies like Night of the Living Dead and The Dick Van Dyke Show, proving that even major entertainment companies could make surprisingly careless mistakes with their most valuable assets. Fact 9. The geological impossibility. The entire premise of the Beverly Hillbillies is based on something that could never actually happen in the real world, because oil deposits simply don't form in the mountainous regions where Jed Clampett was supposed to have made his lucky discovery. According to the show's famous theme song and backstory, Jed was out hunting in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri when he accidentally shot at some game and struck oil instead. But geologists will tell you that this scenario is scientifically impossible due to the way oil deposits are created and where they can be found. Oil forms over millions of years when ancient organic materials like dead plants and animals get buried under layers of sediment in what used to be ocean floors or large inland seas, and these materials need very specific conditions of heat and pressure to slowly transform into the petroleum that we use today. Mountains, on the other hand, are formed by completely different geological processes that involve the Earth's crust being pushed upward by tectonic forces, and the rocky composition of mountainous areas simply doesn't provide the right environment for oil deposits to develop. Real oil fields are typically found in flat or gently rolling areas that were once covered by ancient seas, such as the plains of Texas, Oklahoma, and North Dakota, or in offshore locations where drilling rigs can access underwater deposits that formed on prehistoric ocean floors. The Ozark Mountains where Jed supposedly lived are made up of old, hard rock formations that were created by volcanic activity and tectonic movement, not the sedimentary layers that are necessary for oil formation. Even if there had been some freak geological event that somehow created oil deposits in the Ozarks, Jed's method of discovery makes the story even more unrealistic, since oil doesn't just bubble up to the surface when you fire a rifle at the ground. Modern oil exploration requires sophisticated geological surveys, seismic testing, and expensive drilling equipment to locate and extract petroleum from deep underground reservoirs. Fact 10. John Wayne's bourbon. Only cameo fee. When Hollywood legend John Wayne made a surprise guest appearance on the Beverly Hillbillies in 1967, his approach to payment negotiations was as straightforward and no-nonsense as the characters he played in his famous Western movies. Wayne appeared in an episode called The Indians Are Coming, which featured a storyline about a Native American tribe arriving in Beverly Hills to discuss a boundary dispute related to the Clampett family's oil-rich land back in the Ozarks. The episode was a big deal for the show because Wayne was one of the biggest movie stars in the world at that time, and having him appear on a television sitcom was considered a major coup for the producers and the network. Wayne's presence brought an extra level of excitement and prestige to the Beverly Hillbillies, and it showed that even the most famous actors in Hollywood weren't too proud to make appearances on the popular family comedy that had become a cultural phenomenon. When the show's producers approached Wayne about what he would charge for his guest appearance, they were probably expecting to negotiate a substantial fee that would reflect his status as one of the most bankable stars in the entertainment industry. Instead, Wayne surprised everyone with his simple and direct response to their payment inquiry, telling them that he didn't want any money for his work on the episode. Wayne's exact words when asked about his appearance fee were reportedly, "Give me a fifth of bourbon, and that'll square it," which perfectly captured the laid-back, good-natured attitude that made him such a beloved figure both on and off screen. This casual approach to payment showed that Wayne was genuinely a fan of the show and was happy to make the cameo appearance as a favor to the producers rather than as a business transaction, and it demonstrated the kind of down-to-earth personality that made him so popular with audiences and fellow actors alike. Fact 11. Max Baer Jr.'s secret twin sister role. One of the most unusual casting decisions in television history involved Max Baer Jr. playing not just one character on the Beverly Hillbillies, but two completely different people who happened to be twins, and most viewers never realized they were watching the same actor in both roles. For 11 episodes during the show's first season, Baer transformed himself from the dim-witted Jethro Bodine into his equally slow-thinking twin sister Jethrin Bodine, complete with a full female costume, wig, and makeup that made him look like a completely different person. The writers created Jethrin as Jethro's twin sister and the daughter of cousin Pearl Bodine, and she was supposed to be just as lacking in common sense as her brother, but with the added comedic element of being an oversized woman who towered over most of the other characters. Baer's transformation into Jethrin required extensive costume and makeup work to create the illusion of a female character, and the show's crew went to great lengths to make sure the two characters were never seen together in the same scene, which would have given away the secret. What made this dual role even more elaborate was that Baer couldn't provide Jethrin's voice himself, since his naturally deep, masculine speaking voice would have immediately revealed the trick to viewers. Instead, the show's creators enlisted Linda K. Henning to provide all of Jethrin's dialogue, and her higher-pitched female voice was perfectly synchronized with Baer's lip movements to create the complete illusion of a female character. Linda K. Henning wasn't just a random voice actress brought in for this unusual job, but rather the daughter of Paul Henning, who was the creator and producer of the Beverly Hillbillies. She was already familiar with the show's style and characters, and she later became well known in her own right as Betty Jo Bradley on another Paul Henning creation, Petticoat Junction, which made this family connection even more fitting. Fact 12. The 275 jalopy. The beat-up old truck that carried the Clampett family from their humble mountain home to their luxurious new life in Beverly Hills became one of the most recognizable vehicles in television history, and its value increased by more than 13,000% over the decades following the show's original run. The Clampett's iconic jalopy was actually a 1921 Oldsmobile Model 46 Roadster that originally sold for around $2,000 when it was new, which was a substantial amount of money in the early 1920s, but nothing compared to what it would eventually be worth. The vintage Roadster came equipped with a large V8 engine that was quite powerful for its time, though the show's writers made it clear that the Clampett's version had seen much better days and required some creative solutions to keep it running properly. According to the show's backstory, if the old truck had trouble starting up during cold weather, Jed could fill up a series of special cylinder cups with ether to get the engine purring again, which was actually a real technique used by some car owners during that era. The truck became such an integral part of the Beverly Hillbillies' visual identity that it appeared in the opening credits of every episode, loaded down with all of the family's earthly possessions, and with Granny sitting in her rocking chair on top of the pile, creating one of the most memorable images in television history. The vehicle even traveled internationally when the show's producers shipped it across the Atlantic Ocean to England for some special episodes that took place in Europe, proving just how important this particular prop was to the show's overall success. When the original truck from the series went up for auction in 2015, more than 50 years after the show first premiered, collectors and Beverly Hillbillies fans were willing to pay incredible amounts to own this piece of television history, and the final selling price of $275,000 represented an amazing return on the original $2,000 investment. Fact 13. The Mattel Barbie lawsuit. Nearly 40 years after the Beverly Hillbillies ended, Donna Douglas found herself fighting a legal battle over her famous character when toy giant Mattel decided to create an Ellie Mae Clampett Barbie doll without asking for her permission first. In 2010, Mattel released the doll as part of their popular Culture series that also featured other iconic television characters like Samantha Stevens from Bewitched and Jeannie from I Dream of Jeannie. But Douglas was not happy about being included in this collection of classic TV heroines. The Ellie Mae Barbie came complete with curly blonde pigtails, a plaid shirt, and hair ribbons that perfectly captured the look of Douglas's beloved character, and the doll had what many people considered to be an uncanny resemblance to the actress, who had played the role for all 9 seasons of the show. What made Douglas particularly angry was that Mattel had used her actual photograph on the front of the Barbie box packaging which she felt clearly showed they were using her personal likeness and not just the fictional character she had portrayed. Douglas filed a lawsuit against both Mattel and CBS Consumer Products, seeking at least $75,000 in damages and arguing that the companies had engaged in unauthorized use of her name and likeness to sell and promote their product. She contended that since she was the only actress who had ever played Ellie Mae Clampett during the show's entire run, the public closely identified the character with her specific physical appearance and personality, which meant the doll was essentially a miniature version of her. CBS fought back by claiming in court documents that the network held exclusive rights to the Ellie Mae character and didn't need Douglas's permission to license the character for commercial purposes. However, the case never went to trial because Douglas and the companies reached a settlement agreement in 2011, with the terms of that settlement remaining confidential to this day. Fact 14. The Hamilton-Morgan Plagiarism Settlement. The massive success of the Beverly Hillbillies came with an unexpected legal challenge when a CBS employee named Hamilton Morgan claimed that the network had stolen his original idea and turned it into their biggest hit show, without giving him any credit or compensation. In 1965, just a few years after the Beverly Hillbillies had become the #1 show on television, Morgan filed a $15 million lawsuit against CBS, alleging that the popular sitcom was improperly derived from a show concept he had pitched to the network called Country Cousins. Morgan worked as an employee at CBS, which gave him inside access to the network's development process and made his claims particularly serious, since he would have been in a position to submit ideas and proposals that could potentially be seen by the executives and producers who were responsible for creating new television shows. His lawsuit claimed that CBS had appropriated his submitted ideas and script without his permission and used them as the foundation for what would become one of the most successful sitcoms in television history. The legal battle dragged on for nearly 10 years, creating ongoing uncertainty and expense for both sides, as lawyers argued over the similarities between Morgan's original concept and the actual Beverly Hillbillies episodes that had made the network millions of dollars in advertising revenue and syndication deals. The case represented a significant threat to CBS, because if Morgan had been successful in proving his claims, the network could have been forced to pay enormous damages and possibly even share ongoing profits from the show with him. Rather than continue fighting the expensive lawsuit through the court system, CBS and Hamilton Morgan reached a settlement agreement in 1974 when both parties filed what was called a stipulation of discontinuance that officially ended the legal proceedings. While the exact terms of the settlement were never made public, it was widely reported that CBS made a substantial cash payment to Morgan to resolve his plagiarism claims once and for all. Fact 15. The mansion's record-breaking sale. More than 50 years after the Beverly Hillbillies went off the air, the magnificent mansion that served as the Clampett family home became the centerpiece of the most expensive residential real estate transaction in California history, when it sold for an absolutely staggering price that would have made even Jed Clampett's oil fortune look modest by comparison. In 2019, the Chartwell Mansion in Bel Air was purchased by Lachlan Murdoch, the son of media mogul Rupert Murdoch, for approximately $150 million, which shattered all previous records for residential property sales in the state. The 25,000-square-foot French chateau-style mansion sits on 10 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds that include formal gardens, cascading water features, multiple swimming pools, a tennis court, and several guest houses, making it one of the most luxurious and expansive private estates in one of the world's most expensive neighborhoods. The property had been owned by billionaire media executive Jerry Perenchio, who had purchased it back in 1986 and spent decades renovating and expanding the estate to create what many real estate experts considered to be the ultimate trophy property. When the mansion first went on the market, it was initially listed for an even more astronomical price of $245 million, which would have made it the most expensive home listing in the entire United States at that time. The property's famous connection to the Beverly Hillbillies certainly added to its mystique and historical significance. But the record-breaking sale price was really driven by the mansion's incredible size, prime Bel Air location, and the extensive improvements that had been made over the decades. The sale to Lachlan Murdoch officially set a new benchmark for luxury real estate in California, proving that even in a state known for its expensive properties, the former Clampett mansion still had the power to break new ground and capture headlines more than half a century after it first appeared on television screens across America.